Hello, 12th standard students. In today's class, we will study about the Linux structure, which we have already studied in our previous class. So today we will see about the second structure. There are various components in Linux, and we already have studied about the kernel. So today we will study about the shell. As we understood in a kernel, that kernel stands in between the user and the hardware. Whereas to make this kernel understand what we are as a user entering into a computer, we need a shell. And this shell is the second layer of a Linux. So means user will give a command to a kernel using a shell. So it is just like a DOS prompt in MS-DOS or in Windows, but in Linux we call it a shell. And it is usually used to give all the textual commands to a computer, because we give the command in high level language which can be understood by the user, so that it can give it to the computer. And then through the shell the commands are given to the kernel, and kernel understands it and translate it into a machine language, and then through all the resources of the computer it makes that command done. So this is how the components of a computer, this Linux works. So now we are going to study in detail about the shell. This is a diagram of a Linux kernel given in our syllabus book, and I have a clearer picture of this. Here you can. This is the entire Linux system, and here from the inside it is divided into the two parts. The first is a user space, and next is a kernel space. So by user space, we meant to say that user use various application through which it can give command to a computer, because user cannot directly give a command to a computer because computer understands only the machine language. And to make that machine language and make the computer understandable what we want from a computer, we use various applications. And there are some GNUC library which help user to communicate with the system. Whereas system call interface that have already studied in the previous class, we have a kernel and then the hardware platform. So this basically all the task is done by the hardware platform, but then kernel make it understand what the user wants. And uh, kernel gets all the instructions from a user through this user's application or the GNUC library. That is why user is more comfortable with this application, as he doesn't have to feed everything into a machine in machine language. And then kernel, because it provides an interface between the user and the machine, so it understand all those coming from the user application and make the hardware done uh, the task. Then this is why it is called a kernel space. So this is the architecture of a Linux system, uh, and this is how the work has been done in a Linux OS. So study further about the shell. Here we can see that a shell provides you with an interface to the Linux system. It gathers input from you and execute programs based on that input. When a program finishes, it displays out that program. So through a shell, a user give a command to the kernel. In short, shell is an environment in which we can run our commands, programs, and shell scripts. The shell is classified into two types. So there are two types of shells. First is command line shells, and second is graphical shells. Command line shells, we give all the command through the text, and in graphics we use a graphical interface. Here we can study that the command line shell provides a command line interface, where graphic shell provides a graphical user interface. So the next component of a Linux structure is an application. So Linux has a variety of high quality softwares which can be easily downloaded and installed similarly like Windows or a Mac. The languages like C, C++ are used to develop the application. Means, as we have studied that user feel more conversant and uh, comfortable with the application, because he can give a simple command in his own language to a computer. And similar to a Windows, like we have various application on which we can work very easily. We have applications for Linux also. So advantages of Linux are the open source. After the component, now we are going to study about the advantages of Linux. So first advantage of a Linux is it's a open source. Open source means it is freely available, no licensing is required. One of the main advantages of Linux is that it is an open source operating system, that its source code is easily available for everyone. Anyone capable of coding can contribute to modify, enhance, and distribute the code to anyone and for any purpose. Not only the operating system is free, but it is also uh, enhanced, and it can be enhanced and distribute the code. Anyone can who knows the coding can contribute to the operating system by modifying it, and can further distribute to the further users. So this is a truly open source operating system. Next advantage of a Linux is the security. Linux is more comparison to other OS such as Windows. Every program in Linux, whether an application or a virus, need authorization from administrator in the form of a password. Unless the password is typed, virus won't execute. Means not only an unauthorized user, but even a virus cannot enter into a Linux operating system, because to enter into a computer, whether it is whatever type of file it is, it need an authorization from the administrator or the main user of a computer. So if it doesn't have that authorization, it cannot enter. And For Windows, we know we have to install various type of antiviruses, but in this case, this system Linux is so secure that even and this virus cannot enter into a computer. So it is highly secured system. Next advantage is software update. In Linux, you encounter a large number of software updates. These software updates are much faster than updates in any other operating system, like because it is an open source, as we have discussed it, and anyone can contribute for the enhancement of the system. So because it is open for all to do the modification, so the software updates are available very frequently, because it is not sent by the company itself, but any enhanced user can uh, contribute for the software update. So it is very frequent and fast updation available in the Linux than any other operating system. Next advantage is free to use, or it's very low cost operating system. Linux is freely available on the web to download and use. You do not need to buy the license for it, as Linux and many of its software comes with GNU, general public licensing. So means it is totally free. Stability or reliability. Linux provides high stability. Linux system rarely slows down or freezes. It does not require rebooting after installation or uninstallation of software like as in Windows. As we in Windows, whenever we install a new operating system or a new application, it needs a reboot. It needs a reboot to install that system or a software properly. But here, no rebooting is required when we install or uninstall any software from the system. So it is very reliable, and it is very stable, and it is very safe. Next is fast and easy installation. Linux can easily install from a web and does not require any pre-requirements, as it can run on any hardware, even on the oldest system. So the system requirement is not that much in Linux operating system, and the installation is very easy also. Customization means we can do our own changes into an operating system. You can customize any feature, add or delete any feature according to your need, as it is an open source operating system. As already told that it is an operating system, open source operating system, and it is not compulsory to download all the features of a system. Whatever you need as per your requirement, you can install that system, software into your system, and rest you can uninstall. Then various distribution. There are many distribution of Linux available, like Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, and many more. So there are very distribution uh, companies who are handling with this Linux. So companies like Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, and Red Hat are the well-known distributors who are distributing this and contributing for the um popularity of the Linux. So it provides various choices of flavors to the user. Next is large community support. Some form are made on web by the user to help and solve the problem any other user is facing. There are a lot of dedicated programmers to help you out whenever possible. So there is a very large community nowadays, because it is also seen as an alternative operating system for highly paid operating system like Windows or a Macintosh. But then it is not only free, but very large community of people are also working for the development and of the software, and helping out the people who are facing the problem while using it. So it's a we are getting a large community support while using a system. So performance of a Linux is very high on various networks and workstations, so it is understandable by all the networks. So it's not like it is a different operating system and it will not work on a particular network. It is well compatible for all the networks and workstation. It allows a large number of users to work simultaneously and handles them efficiently. Privacy. Linux ensures the privacy of a user's data, as it never collects much data from the user while using its distribution or software. No, because it is free, no license are required while installation. So, not much of a data is required of a user when he or she is installing this in the system. So, the user privacy is always maintained while using this operating system. So these were the some advantages of Linux operating system, and it is so far the cheapest and the best operating system available in the market, and it has many more feature. Although it's free, but it has many more feature than any other operating system available. The next is the Linux desktop. Just like the Windows desktop or a Macintosh desktop, we also have a Linux desktop. While using a Linux, the desktop is available over which we can work and perform many various tasks. The desktop of Ubuntu is Genome. Genome is a desktop environment, free and open source system. Desktop is a place where icon, menu, panels, background are arranged and displayed. To log on to Linux, enter password and press enter button. So I'm going to show you how the Linux or desktop looks like. So this is the desktop screen of a Linux, and we are here taking example of Ubuntu version. So this is as good as the Windows, and we can see all the components. And this is the screen of Linux desktop. So in our next class, we will study about these desktops and the components of Linux desktop. So till then, take care and stay safe. Thank you very much.